What is what's the involvement? What is the connection between the October 7th Hamas attacks and Afghanistan?
Yeah, so the interesting part is, right? So this was the other investigation we weren't going to do, okay? So we put out Abbey Gate because CENTCOM, I thought, did something very embarrassing. And then what we knew the plotting had happened in Afghanistan. But we thought, okay, Israel is just going to keep calling it the Hamas attacks until they wipe out Hamas, right? That makes sense. You can't fight 3 or 4 different fronts, right? Or different terrorist groups at the same time. Well, we're getting closer to coming up on the year mark of it, and Israel still wasn't telling anyone, obviously they knew IRGC was involved because they took out a bunch of them, but they weren't telling anybody about Al-Qaeda and the Taliban, and they weren't striking Al-Qaeda and the Taliban. But we knew Israel is in a series of attacks, right? And those series of attacks include the U.S. homeland. So we're like, if we don't put out the truth that Al-Qaeda did October 7th, then how do we expect the law enforcement and first responders in the U.S. to be prepared if no one told them October 7th was the same people who are going to attack in the U.S., right? Because if you can look at those tactics, prepare, do different training, it puts you in a more resilient position if an attack happens in your community. So that was the catalyst that made us put out October 7th. So basically what happened is this was a joint kind of Al-Qaeda, IRGC thing. And I said, this is a whole bigger thing. And they did all this over Telegram for the most part. So they had an original planning meeting in Kandahar again. And then they had kind of like their second meeting up in Kabul. And then most of the rest of the plotting occurred via Telegram. And then, which is crazy, right? You'd think our governments could collect that in advance. We learned a lot of things during this process. First off, in the first plotting meeting, it was Saif al-Adil. He runs the military commission of the Taliban. He's the one that chose the date. Do you know what's significant about October 7th?
No.
So he first chose October 7th, 2022. I told you it got pushed a year because of Zawahiri, which is also its own point, right? We struck an Al-Qaeda member and it forced them to push the attack another year. What if we kept striking them in Afghanistan during that time, right? It could have pushed the attacks longer. And this is why I say we need to strike the command and control of the homeland attack, right? But anyway, set aside, October 7th was the day George Bush announced Operation Enduring Freedom, and we basically started carpet bombing Kandahar.